On this week's episode of the Best of Johnston County podcast, our guest is Judge Addie Rawls, and this is the first of 2 episodes we did with her. In this episode, we talked to her about her time growing up in Little Washington, how she took a Trailways bus to get to Wake Forest University, her time at North Carolina Central. She also clerked at the Court of Appeals, and when she was hired by Judge Tom Locke, who at that time was our DA, to be the first African-American prosecutor in Johnston County history. We also talked to her a little bit about her starting of New Generations Church and her back-to-school youth explosion, where anybody that wants to can come get a haircut, a meal, and a backpack full of school supplies on August 9th at Clayton High School from 2 to 5. So listen in.
Welcome to another episode of Best of Johnston County, brought to you by Breeden Law Office. Our host, Jonathan Breeden, an experienced family lawyer with a deep connection to the community, is ready to take you on a journey through the area that he has called home for over 20 years. Whether it's a deep dive into the love locals have for the county or unraveling the complexities of family law, Best of Johnston County presents an authentic slice of this unique community.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Johnston County podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden, and on today's episode, we have retired Judge Addie Rawls, who is now the pastor of New Generation Church in Smithfield, North Carolina. We're going to do 2 episodes with Judge Rawls. One we're going to do today. This one, we're going to talk a little bit about her growing up, her story of how she became an attorney and a lawyer, and how she rose to become the first African-American female judge in the history of Johnston County, and a little bit about what she's doing in New Generation Church and her back-to-school youth explosion, which is, I think, maybe in its 9th or 10th year now, where they give away free backpacks and haircuts to use for free in August of every year. And then we'll do another episode that's going to run next week, where we're going to talk to her a little bit about what is district court, what does a district court judge do. I'm in district court with family law. Y'all hear me talk about family law all the time, but family law domestic is only 1/7 of what the district court actually does. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with her. And we'll talk to her a little more about the church, how it got started, how it's grown, and, some of the things it's doing outside of just the back to school youth explosion. But at this point, on this one, we're going to talk a little bit about what her story is. It's going to be a ton of fun. So if you're interested in any of this, listen to the rest of this episode. Anyway, before we do that, I'd like to ask you to like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you see it, whether it be on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, X, LinkedIn, or any of the other social media channels of the Best Johnston County podcast. The Best Johnston County podcast comes out every single Monday and has now for over 30 months. So go back and listen to some of our previous episodes. We've had the vast majority of the county commissioners. We've had Just Dog People. We've had Woody Bailey talking about IT services. Recently we had Carolina Packers talking about hot dogs and bologna and all the things they do. So if you love Johnston County as much as I do, this is the podcast for you. Welcome, Judge Rawls.
Good morning. Good to be here.
I've been wanting to do this since I started this, and I'm glad you've been willing to come out here and do this and talk to us. So anyway, state your name and what you do.
My name is Addie M. Harris Rawls, and I'm a retired district court judge, full-time pastor of New Generation Christian Church, and community involver. I guess it's the best way to put it.
A connector, for absolutely sure. You've definitely done a ton for the community. Let's start with, I want to do some of this episode about your story. I've always found it fascinating. I think you grew up in Little Washington, North Carolina. Is that right?
The original Washington, as we call it. But certainly everyone else says Little Washington. I grew up there with a grandmother, my aunt, who took care of me as a young girl, and went to schools there. I went to the Catholic school for the first 3 years of my school, and then that school closed. It was called Mother Mercy Catholic School. I'll never forget. And then I went to the public school and graduated from there and headed off to Wake Forest.
So how does somebody from Little Washington end up at Wake Forest?
My guidance counselor became my friend in high school. And she had a nephew who attended Wake Forest, and he actually is a clinical psychologist. And he talked to me about Wake Forest, and believe it or not, that was the only school I applied to, early admission. And then I went back and received the George Foster Hankins Scholarship, and the rest is history. I spent 4 years there during the time when Muggsy Bogues was there,
right?
Elvis Rogers and all of them were graduating. He was from Washington. So there was something floating about that because we knew about it because of Elvis. And Muggsy Bogues. There was a young man named Michael Ramseur, that were there, and it was probably 130 minorities there at that time.
In the whole school.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, and the school probably had about 4,000 students. This would have been in the 80s?
The 80s, 1982 to 86.
82 to 86, yeah. And so for those of y'all remember, Muggsy Bogues goes on to play in the NBA. He was a 5'3" point guard, absolutely a fascinating individual, and gone on to become a great leadership speaker and stuff now. And I was a big fan of Muggsy Bogues when I was a child because I was short, and I thought, well, if Muggsy Bogues can play in the ACC, Jonathan Breeden can play in the ACC, but needless to say, I didn't quite have that. Even though I'm 5'3", 5'4", quite have the athletic ability of Muggsy Bogues. But I mean, I think like at one point, like you didn't have a car, so you had to take like a bus to go back and forth to Winston-Salem?
I did. I rode Trailways. My uncle was a cab driver, and he would pick me up, and I'd go home during the summers, get ready to go back to school. The first time, my guidance counselor took me, my grandmother. The next times we would go back and forth, or I catch family members and different ones there. And I remember he would check bags under the bus. And every time when I arrived in Winston-Salem, they would say, "Who do you know in Washington? Because there's no way you got all these bags on the bus." And I was like, I did. I remember my uncle knew the guy that loaded the bus, and back then they tipped too. So the bus got loaded with all my stuff. Of course, after a while, the dorms I remember had basements, and we could store stuff in the summers in the basements. So we would pull these big boxes from one dorm to the other dorm with all our stuff. Ironically enough, Laurie Birch was on my hall during my sophomore year. I was a residence counselor for there at school for 2 years, and it was historical for me. I tutored athletes, so that's how I knew. Muggsy and I were in classes together, but I knew all of them because I would tutor Western civilization. So they came up with an idea that it was cheaper to pay me, back then it was like $39 an hour, which was good money.
That's a lot of money.
To tutor students in the class. So I would bring them all in the classroom, and I would tutor and go over, things they needed to note and learn for their tests and stuff. So I worked as a tutor, a residence counselor, and I was always doing 2 jobs. I think I even had some of the residence counselor work, but I recall working in the library at some point too. So weekends we were at school, so we worked at school. I remember going to Wake Forest. You had these big meal plans, but we would cancel the meal plan because then it made so that, as I was an independent student in school. So it would make it so I could really afford, because they considered that we should work during the summer and be able to contribute about $900 towards our education. I'll never forget it. And I remember that to make it work, I would cancel a meal plan, and there was a grocery store we could cut through the woods and buy food, and all the dorms had kitchens and stuff. And the other thing that I remember is that then when students wanted to sell their meal plans, you would wait and you buy a little bit up front so you could go in the cafeteria and eat and stuff. And then later on, what we would do, we would wait to the middle of the year when people got desperate, and you would get 50 for one.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's what we would
I got you.
We would do that. And we made it work. I'll never forget that. And the athletes had their own kitchen. I was their tutor.
So they helped you out.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you graduated Wake Forest, and then I think you go to law school at North Carolina Central.
Central.
What made you want to go to law school?
I was student teaching my last year, and I remember the last day the applications were due, I decided that I didn't want to teach. Then I sent my application in for law school. Always as a child, I argued, I talked. Back then, I remember Perry Mason, Ironside. I remember those things. And Matlock, those were things I remember. And I became fascinated in high school with African American civil rights leaders and Brown versus Board of Education. And I became real fascinated with stuff like that. And so I thought if, people like Thurgood Marshall could do it, why couldn't
you? I mean, you'd go from Little Washington to Wake Forest, one of the most elite private schools in the United States. Now you go to a public school in North Carolina Central for law school. Did you have a scholarship to go to Central?
I did. I actually, for Wake Forest, being the George Foster Hankins Scholar, it actually back then when there were Pell Grants and all this stuff you could get, I think I ended up only owing about $5,000 to Wake Forest when I graduated.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I ended up at Central as a Board of Governors scholar.
Okay.
I didn't get that until after I had taken the bar review course during the summer and my scores went up on the LSAT.
Okay.
So then after that, the dean called me in and says, you show real privilege. I need you to come here, be ready to work hard.
Right.
And we're going to give you a board of governor scholarship, which was about $4,000 a year.
Okay.
I believe it was. Back then, law school was only $800 and some dollars a semester.
Right.
So
yeah. Golly,
it
now
worked
it's
out.
$50,000 a
Yeah.
year.
Then you
Or
land
more.
great jobs in law school. So, for
Right.
instance, I worked for an attorney there, and I also ran an English lab at the community college.
Oh, I didn't know
So
that.
I was paid to go sit there, and students who were learning how to read and stuff would come to the lab, and I would work with them on their English work.
Oh, cool.
And so I'd go every day, like for 2 hours. So I got paid for like 3 or 4 days a week
Okay.
to sit out there and work with students. Then the position came open with the lawyer, and he wanted me to quit the lab, but I wouldn't quit the lab because I felt like the lab paid more than the lawyer paid. So I didn't quit the lab, but I worked that lab the whole 3 years I was in school.
Oh, that's
And I
awesome.
ended up working with the attorney, which allowed me to go into court, do some research in the background and stuff. And then Judge Sidney Eagles, who was our retired chief judge
Yep.
of the Court of Appeals, came to Central to recruit an African minority student
Okay.
to work with him as a clerk.
Okay.
And I met him in the summer of my second year, and he actually offered me the position to come work for him when I graduated my third year.
Okay. So you move, so you graduate, like, is it like maybe 89?
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right. And you go clerk for City Eagles. And
2
his
years.
daughter is Margaret Eagles, the current chief district court judge in Wake County, who
Yes.
graduated from Campbell with me in 2000, 26 years ago.
They were
So-
young when I was working.
Right. Her sister, who does one of the legislative internship programs
Mhm.
now. Very, very nice. Both really, really good people. So you clerked for a year.
2 years.
2 years. So what does a clerk do? They write opinions, I know.
We draft opinions,
Right.
but the last hand it ever passed through was our judges.
Right.
And that's what Judge Eagles' motto was. The last hand an opinion will ever come through will be mine.
Right.
And he was awesome. He would have us over to his home. We knew his children, his wife, and ended up, we were also all a part of the Disciples of Christ congregation as well. And so I maintained contact with him for a good amount of time.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
he was wonderful.
Have family law questions? Need guidance to navigate legal challenges? The compassionate team at Breeden Law Office is here to help. Visit us at www.breedenfirm.com for practical advice, resources, or to book a consultation. Remember, when life gets messy, you don't have to face it alone.
So now we're up to, like, I guess 91, and you end up at the DA's office in Johnston County. How does that happen?
Judge Locke, who was then District Attorney Locke,
Thomas Locke, our current
I
resident
made a
Superior Court
promise
judge.
when he ran for district attorney to integrate the office basically and bring in some minorities to the office, which had never been done.
Okay.
And I was looking for a job. An attorney had met him and he had approached her about working. And she says, no, I'm a private attorney. That's what I'm going to do. But she says, I know a young lady who I know, because back then Central was, a nice sized law school,
Right.
but everybody stayed in contact. And
Right.
so she mentioned it to me, and I reached out to Judge Locke then, Tom, my friend, and
Yeah.
said to him, he interviewed me, he offered me a job, but he needed me to go to work immediately, but he was too afraid to make a Court of Appeals judge mad by recruiting his clerk. And so it went on for a while, but eventually in August of 91, I came to work in Johnston County as the first African-American assistant DA.
I didn't know that part. I didn't know that. First Africa. How about that? All right. And you quickly rise through the ranks. You become a domestic violence, sexual assault prosecutor. That's what I remember you as when I get here in 2000. I'm sure you did other stuff before you got there.
Juvenile was always my heart.
Juvenile. Okay.
So I actually prosecuted juvenile court in all 3 counties. I ended up teaching in new prosecutor school, juvenile court to prosecutors. And that was my heart. That was my heart then. That was my heart on the bench.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
And still my heart.
Right. So juvenile criminal court is done in the district courts of North Carolina. And that, at the time that she was prosecuting, it was any crime committed by somebody under the age of 16. About 10 years ago, the legislature raised the age to 18. So now most crimes that are not serious felonies, if you're under 18, would go through the juvenile system. And if it's a serious felony, then they hold you over to adult court. And so that they still do that. So when you see these 16, 17-year-olds charged with murder and all of a sudden they're in adult court, it starts in juvenile court, but then the juvenile court releases it to the adult court at the request of the prosecutor. Judge approves it. So you did that. But you also did a lot of, when I got here, you're doing a ton of rapes and stuff like that. I know everybody had
did all of the sexual assaults. I did misdemeanor appeals in that office, and I also would work court. I spent a lot of time doing disposition court and different things. I enjoyed trying cases, working court. My reputation was cross-examination, and that's what I did. And
I remember trying a case with you. I think it was in juvenile court, and I thought I was doing pretty good. And you were just sitting there, and I'm like, she's not objecting, and she's just like, I'm thinking, man, I'm doing great. I was a young attorney, and then you lean back up, and 5 questions later, it was over. That's all I remember. I thought I had it, and then it was over. You leaned back up in that chair, and that was it. I had lost the case. Frank Lanier had found my client guilty, and that's how it went. But anyway,
adjudicated him delinquent.
That's true. You know, actually,
language is clear.
Right. I understand that. So, and then was it 2002 you become a judge?
Yes.
Is that right?
January of 2002.
Okay.
I was appointed and then
how did that come
same
about?
year.
The bar call. When I was there, was there a bar vote or the governor? I don't know exactly.
It was a bar vote, and then the governor. Unfortunately, our very first African American was Judge Robert Anderson.
Yes.
And he died very untimely for us, but he was an awesome judge and great mentor. And I felt like when the first position opened up, it was a new seat. I embraced the love of Johnston County that determined that we needed some diversity.
Right.
That's the word. And so at his untimely death, I pursued the seat and received the top bar vote and was actually chosen by the governor at that time. Governor Easley,
yes.
To serve in that position.
Yeah, and then you immediately had to run, right? Because the election was in November. You get appointed in January, and the election's in November of 2002, correct?
Mm-hmm. And I had 3 opponents.
Right.
And 2 are now gone, but we worked together back in the day, and one of them was a church member. So we start mixing all the lines. But it was hard work. I worked hard. I had a lot of love across the district, 3 counties, Johnston, Harnett, and Lee County.
Yeah, no doubt. And I remember helping you on that campaign. And I know you're gonna find this funny. I think I still have one of the fundraising letters from one of the beginnings. I just stuck them in a drawer. And I thought, well, if all these people are supporting Judge Rawls, if I ever decide to run, I probably need to know who their names were because I was new here. Now, 24 years later, Jonathan Breeden hadn't run for anything. But I think I still have one of those original letters from one of the fundraisers that I worked on in a drawer. I'm pretty sure I could probably put my hands on it. And I'll have to go look for it, and I'll have to send it to you because a lot of those people probably have passed on. A lot of those people are still around, but 24 years later, I just remembered, I think I might still have
I had a lot of supporters, a lot of grassroots efforts. I remember right out here in Cleveland, where we are now, I had a big thing with the Band of Oz, and they were singing, "Ooh, baby, I want to know will you be my judge?" And that was the song.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. That's great. And so you go on to serve as district court judge until 2024?
2022.
2022. Golly, man, it goes fast, doesn't it?
I believe it was 2022.
Yeah, man, time flies.
Let me get it straight. Because I've been retired 5 years.
Yeah.
In January.
Yeah, well, that January will be 27. So, yeah. Golly, man, it's hard to believe it goes by that fast, right?
I didn't know where the 20 years went.
Right. Well, I don't know where the last 5 years is when you've been retired that long.
Yeah.
So that's wild. That's wild. Well, in the next episode, we'll talk about your time as district court judge and what a district court judge does. But right now, I want to turn to what you're doing now. You became the pastor at New Generation Church while you were still
2010.
Right. 2010.
We're celebrating our 16th year this year.
And you started that church from scratch. I remember that.
I did.
And you were still preaching. You were still a judge for the first 12 years. And I still don't exactly know how you could be a preacher and a judge. Maybe you just didn't sleep, but I mean, you did it.
I slept. I did what I had to do. I had great supporters who worked. I worked my job, but I also worked the ministry and different people helping, and we got to where we are now. And one of my greatest helpers is my son, who a couple of years ago I named my executive pastor at the church, and he kind of administrates everything. He keeps things moving along.
Well, that's good.
And helps me in that endeavor. But a lot of people working together, doing a lot of stuff. Our vision of the church was a community church meeting the needs of the community, whatever those needs are.
Right.
And I don't like the word no. I still don't like the word no. I try not to deal with no's in my life. I try to move forward with all the yeses I can. But we found out there are a lot of people in need. And certainly, I actually, in the midst of all those years, found time to go get a master in theological studies. And I'm currently working on my DMin, my doctor in ministry. So, and part of that is at a school in Lexington, Kentucky called Lexington Theological Seminary, 150 plus year seminary. Part of it is learning that we just don't take it from the textbook, but we actually engage and put it in action in our communities.
Right.
And so a lot of stuff that I've done, my professor was talking to me a few weeks ago, and she says, you're the only person that I can know that during the pandemic, you figure out how to get a tractor trailer to come through your town for several months every Monday, dropping off 1,100 boxes of food to distribute to people during the time of need.
Yeah.
And I said, it worked. I actually found a man here who had a loading dock, and he would have his forklift operator come and help unload it. And we were able to get food into every area of the county and beyond during that time. People would bring trailers and trucks and vans, and we were distributing food to people.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, you've got your back to school youth explosion coming up. It's on August
9th. At Clayton High School from 2 to 5. Even in the midst of all of that construction that's going on, we're going to have it there because that's where we have it.
All right. And is this the 9th year for it?
12.
12. Oh, my goodness. Okay. 12. Yeah. So, and that's where anybody, regardless of race, income, whatever, you can come get a haircut, a meal, and a backpack full of school supplies.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's right.
And how many kids came through it last year? Several hundred.
Over 1,000.
It was over 1,000. Oh my goodness,
kids.
That is
they come through there. It's amazing to sit there. Last year, I sat in the middle of the gym where they were cutting hair and just watched the children, and they would come in to get their backpacks and just watch the kids come. We had our DA was there. We had the superintendent of schools there. Just so many people who would come to be a part of that and just show that we're not just who we are. We are people who are concerned about the citizens of this county.
No, it's a tremendous thing, and I've been happy to sponsor it for probably as long as it's been going on, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing every year. I mean, I can't believe over 1,000 kids went through it last year. That's awesome, and I know y'all could use some more sponsorships. How can people reach out to you to help sponsor this free community event?
New Generation Christian Church. Our number is 919-209-0536. And Fathead Barbershop in Clayton, North Carolina, right on 70 Highway. And they can reach out in those methods to us, and we're ready and able to come and do. You mentioned you had Carolina Packer here. They've been a wonderful supporter of this event, and for as long as we've been doing it.
Right.
And I appreciate that. The long-standing partnerships and all the Greek organizations, churches, and other community businesses have been engaged and involved with what we do. And I mean, just whether it's backpacks, school supplies, or whatever they give, it's just been a blessing. During COVID, we had to go to a drive-through event.
Right.
But I remember a young lady who worked in the courthouse said to me, as a single parent, that she liked that, but she liked coming to the event because she said she saw the grace of God in action at the event.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, so we'd like to thank Judge Rawls for being our guest on this episode of the Best of Johnston County podcast. If you'd like to support this community event on August 9th, please reach out to New Generation Church or Fathead Barbershop, and they'll take all types of donations. And if you want to volunteer, reach out as well. It takes well over 100 volunteers at least to put it on every single year. And it is a tremendous event, and it'll bring tears to your eyes to see that many kids and all the stuff that they do to help children here in Johnston County. As I mentioned earlier, please like, follow, subscribe to this podcast wherever you see it, whether on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, or X, so you'll be aware of future episodes of Best Johnston County. And check us next week. We're going to have another episode with Judge Rawls. We're going to talk a little bit about what does a district court judge do. Until next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden.
That's the end of today's episode of Best of Johnston County, a show brought to you by the trusted team at Breeden Law Office. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing more interesting facets of this community next week. Every story, every viewpoint adds another thread to the rich tapestry of Johnston County. If the legal aspects highlighted raise some questions, help is just around the corner at www.breedenfirm.com.